second book of the Aeneid. It's one of the best, if not the best, story Virgil ever told. Concise, pointed, vivid. The beginning and the end of my account are not in Virgil. I've taken the story from Philoctetus and the death of Ajax from the two plays of the 5th century tragic poet Sophocles. The end, the tale, what happened to the Trojan women when Troy fell, comes from a play by Sophocles' fellow playwright Euripides. It's a curious contrast to the martial spirit of the Aeneid. To Virgil, as to all Roman poets, war was the noblest and most glorious of human activities. 400 years before Virgil, a Greek poet looked at it differently. What was the end of that far-famed war? Euripides seems to ask just this: a ruined town, a dead baby, a few wretched women. Brilliant prose. Well, let's go now into this one. Let's talk first about Achilles' last great battle. He fights against Prince Minon, who's an Ethiopian, and ultimately he ends up killing him. Antiochus, the young son of the old man Nestor, dies in the battles. Finally, Achilles will kill Memnon, and then in the middle of the battle, it will be Paris, who has not factored always so heavily in many of these fights, who will shoot an arrow at at Achilles. And with the help of Apollo, that arrow will find the heel of Achilles. And for the first time in his life, Achilles feels physical pain. He looks down, his heel is bleeding. Well, of course, what's happened is that when Theseus' mother dipped him in the river Styx, she held on to one of his ankles. And instead of dipping him a second time by holding on to the other ankle, she didn't do that. So there was only one place on Achilles. Of course, we say metaphorically, what is your Achilles heel? It is that weakness that you have, yes, that you don't know that is your weakness until, of course, it's too late. And this is the way that Achilles will die. When he is dead, they burn him, and then they take his ashes and they mingle them in the same urn with his friend Patroclus. The next interesting part of our story is that beautiful armor that Achilles got after Patroclus was killed, that Hephaestus made. What are you going to do with that armor? The decision is made. It will be given to one of two warriors. Either it will be given to the great warrior Ajax, or it will be given to Odysseus. Agamemnon and Menelaus decide, along with the rest of the men, to give the armor to Odysseus. Ajax is insulted, and he is irate. He wants to kill Agamemnon and Menelaus as well as Oedipus. And so that night, he goes with his sword. He slaughters the men of Agamemnon and Menelaus, just killing them by the hundreds. He grabs Odysseus. He drags him to his tent. He ties him to a center post. He picks up a baseball bat and he beats to death through the night the screaming Odysseus. In the morning, when Ajax wakes up, he sees dead sheep lying all over the battlefield. And he realizes that he has been shamed and he's been fooled. He thought he was beating up Odysseus. He was beating up this large ram. In his shame, he will turn his sword on himself and he will kill himself. Now this is huge for our notes. The Romans, if you know your Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, you know this is right. The Romans, if they are shamed, they kill themselves, and that redeems their shame. For the Greeks, this is not the case. So Ajax committing suicide means he will not be burned up in a funeral pyre, but rather buried in the ground. Okay? It's at this moment that the Greek prophet, Calchas, will say to Agamemnon, the only way you're ever actually going to win this war is to find the Trojan prophet Helenus. Helenus they find. And he says, the only way you're going to win this war is to find the bow and arrow set of Hercules. Now, I don't know if you'll remember this, but Hercules, when we said this earlier, Hercules, when he died, he gave his bow and arrow, which is a famous weapon, right, to Philoctetus. Where is Philoctetus? Well, he started out on his way to fight for the Greeks, and he ended up on an island there. He got bit by a snake, and he got sick. And so he got left at Lemnos. this island, okay? And the Greeks went on to fight this war. Well, now they got a problem. They got to go back to that island. They got to go and find Philoctetes, and they got to say, we really need your bow and arrow set to come and fight at the walls of Troy so we can win. Who do they send? Well, you can probably guess it at this point. Of course they send Odysseus. Why? He's the best talker, isn't he? So Odysseus shows up. He goes to Philoctetes. Philoctetes at first is like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to help you guys out. You don't help me, I don't help you. Ultimately, however, he does come back, Philoctetes, and his wounds are repaired. And ultimately, it will be Philoctetes who will wound Paris, right? Paris, wounded, will go back to his original girl that he was living with before the judgment of Paris, Ononi. And he asks Ononi, will you please cure me of my wound? And Ononi says, oh, you're the guy that ran off from me to go find a better looking girl in Helen? Yeah, no. Paris dies, and Ononi, in her shame and in her guilt, kills herself. It's an interesting story of its own right. Well, there's a problem. Why can't Troy fall? The answer is given to Agamemnon and to Odysseus. Well, it has to do with Athena, and it has to do with the sacred image of Athena called the Palladium. The Palladium is inside of the city of Troy. Once you get that famous statue out of the city of Troy, Troy the city will fall. Odysseus and Diomedes, the great heroes, sneak into the city, steal the Palladium, and then they're ready, of course, for the end. Odysseus has a plan. I tell you how we'll get inside the walls of Troy. We will lie and we will cheat. Simple. The way we're going to do this is simply, we're going to build this huge wooden horse. Empty inside. We're going to have warriors that will climb up inside of this, along with myself, as well as Pyrrhus, the great warrior, the son of Achilles, and we're going to be able to fool them. But the way that we're going to fool them is also very interesting as well. We're going to have a lie that will be told. We're going to leave behind Sinon. Sinon is a good liar, so this is what he's going to do. He's going to say to the Trojans, here's the deal. The Greeks knew they had done something really terrible when they stole that image of Athena. They feared they would never win the war, so they all sailed away. They built this large wooden horse as sacrifice. They wanted to sacrifice me, but I got away. But here's the thing. The Greeks hope that you will burn this horse so that it will be good for them, good luck for them, to get back to Greece. Of course, the idea is simple. The Trojans are going to say, wait a minute, this horse is a good luck charm. Let's push it inside of the city. And of course, once the horse goes inside of the city, all of the Trojans are going to start partying because they think that the war is ended. The warriors inside are going to sneak out. And then, of course, the Greek troops will turn around and come back in their ships under cover of night. And we're going to slaughter every Trojan in this city. Wow. Well, it works, but there's a couple of interesting stories as well. Lacon, who is a Trojan priest, immediately knows there's something seriously fishy about this story. He says it, don't believe this story. And his two boys are standing with him. When out of the sea come a couple of sea snakes, and they grab a hold of him, they strangle him to death, and Lacon is taken into the sea. The Trojans believe that this is evidence they should push the horse into the city. The other tragic story is Cassandra. We're going to have a couple of stories about her. Let's put her in your notes now. Cassandra has a blessing and a curse. Her blessing is she always tells the truth. Always. She knows the future, she tells the truth. Her curse is no one will believe her. She sees the horse and she's like, you guys, there's bad guys inside. They're all going to kill us. The Greeks are not giving up. This is a trick. Nobody will listen to Cassandra. She is sent away. Unfortunately, of course, we have next the fall of Troy. Here it comes. The Trojans, of course, recognize they are going to lose once the Greeks get inside the city. They do some really intelligent things. For example, the Trojans start dressing up, taking the dead Greek armor off and putting it on, so that the Greeks think they're fighting alongside their buddy, and then all of a sudden it's a Trojan who kills them. But in spite of all of that, it's still an impossibility for them. And the Trojans fight hard, but it's no good. Achilles' son, Paris, will kill Priam, the king, at the altar. Whoa. Aeneas, Aphrodite's son, will be the last Trojan man to escape. He fights hard, but he realizes it's no good. He's going to go back and fight and die, but it will be the God who will say to him, "You don't die here. I have something more important for you, Aeneas. You are going to be the founder of a great people called the Romans. Get on your boat with your father, your young son, and your wife, and sail away." He takes his father and he throws him over his shoulder. He takes his wife and grabs her by the hand, and his son. Somewhere on the way to the boat, he and his wife's hands separate. His wife is freaking out because Troy is going up in smoke and people are dying all over the place. The streets are running with blood. And by the time Aeneas gets to the boat, his wife is not there. And instead of going back and looking for her, he sails away. We'll have more to tell about Aeneas here in a few seconds when we get to our final part of our story. Finally, of course, you have the stories. And there's any number of them, right? So, for example, all the women are lined up. Down the line will go Menelaus. Of course, who's he looking for? He's looking for his wife, Helen, the one who started all this mess. And he's already said it out loud. I'm going to kill her when I get to her. I'm going to kill her because she started all this 10 years and all the men and all the bloodshed. Oh, I'm going to jack her good. And he goes down the line. There's one woman that won't look up in his face. It's Helen, of course. He has worried that maybe she's dead. He has worried that maybe he won't recognize her, because it's been so many years and he hasn't seen her. Maybe she will have changed. When she looks up at him, she smiles, and he can't kill her. All he says is, "Don't do it again. Get in the boat." And off they sail back to Sparta. We have other stories, though, that are more interesting. Like, for example, Agamemnon. He goes down the line to choose the best-looking girl for him. And when he sees Cassandra, he's like, "That's the girl." The minute Cassandra sees Agamemnon, she goes, "Uh-oh, don't go home. Whatever you do, you're going to die if you go home." Agamemnon says, "I like her. Gag her. Put her in the boat." Of course, the homecoming of Agamemnon is going to be a brutal homecoming. We're going to be talking about that when, as he gets on his boat, he sails all the way back home. When he gets home to Clytemnestra, she will be waiting for him. Of course, Clytemnestra is mad at Agamemnon because 10 years before, Agamemnon sacrificed her daughter Iphigenia. Remember that story? I told you, mamas don't forget. And of course, when he shows up, Clytemnestra has a plan. She's dressed up in this slinky outfit. She says, "I'm so glad you're home. You have no idea what I want to do to your body." Agamemnon, "Yes, it's great to be a king." The gag falls off Cassandra. "Uh-oh, she's going to kill us all." "Gag her, bring her in with me." Inside of the castle, Cassandra will feed her husband, and while he's eating, she will go out of the room, come back into the room with an axe, and go to work on Agamemnon for a number of hours. She won't kill him, she just jacks him. What do they say about paybacks? There you go. So we've got all these different kind of homecoming stories that will be a part of our stories, right? We have as well the story of the captive women. Hecuba is taken away. Andromache is taken away as well, Hector's wife and his young son. The question is what to do with the young boy, right? Oh, it's a tragic story. The most tragic, right? Because Andromache's like, he's a little boy. He's an infant. I mean, it's not like he's going to do anything. But no, the decision is made by, guess who? Odysseus. This kid will grow up and he will exact revenge on every one of us. We got to kill him. So they take that little boy to the top of the Trojan walls and they throw him off. And his little body tumbles through the air and hits on the rocks below. And that's the end of the city of Troy. The walls, dismembered, dragged 100 miles away so that you can't even tell a city was there. And in fact, of course, the end of the walls of Troy and into the city of Troy. It's the prophecy. Remember it? Many, many years before. And in fact, that's how old man Priam dies. He goes down a dead-end street and finds himself in front of the altar. He falls on his knees and he begs for his life. Pyrrhus, the son of Achilles, with that sword dripping in blood, will come up and he'll bring that sword down right on top of old man Priam's head, and he'll stop right over his head. And we're told the city of Troy goes dead silent. And a thought flashes through old man Priam's mind. What's that thought? A dark and stormy night many years before, when his son Paris was born. And that prophet said, if you don't kill that kid, he'll be the end of your city. And that was the last thought Priam had, the end of our story for the fall of Troy. Well, let's talk at level 2 and 3 here really quickly in your notes, all right? At 2a, well, beware of Greeks bearing gifts is a famous line for a reason, right? In other words, these Greeks have given us this amazing horse. Let's push it inside the city. Aeneas will tell us they even tore down parts of their walls to get that horse inside the city. Of course, at 2b, in the conflict here, notice it's always the question of trust, right? It's always hard to know in this kind of a story as well who you root for, right? Notice that. The brilliance of the story is that you have a hard time knowing who you're supposed to root for. Who's the actual heroes of this story, right? Is Odysseus a hero or is he a villain? Is Achilles a hero or is he a villain? That kind of thing, right? At 3a, well, obviously you can think about the famous texts that translate the fall of a great city. And the ways in which a great city, when it falls, is always going to be a major storyline. For you, what's your favorite text there? Obviously, we're going to say as well for your notes here at 3a, I would recommend the Aeneid to you as a text that you should read. I'll say that again later when we talk about Aeneas. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you were fooled? Think about the Trojan story. What was there a time when you were fooled by something you thought was good? Right? Okay, this is going to be so great, and then it ended up being something quite terrible. Or when was a time that you actually got fooled by somebody? Come on, this is going to be great. You're going to love doing this. And then halfway through it, you go, oh, man, I just got jacked because I trusted somebody. And ultimately, they were actually trying to mess with me. They weren't trying to help me at all. It looked like they were trying to help me, but they weren't. Okay, let's turn now, to chapter 15 and chapter 16 of Hamilton's Part 4 of Mythology. Chapter 15 is going to be the homecoming of Odysseus. Chapter 16 is going to be the homecoming or the leaving of Troy and ultimately finding his way to Italy, the adventures of Aeneas. Let's go through it really quickly. Of course, this is primarily the story of Homer's Odyssey, and I've already given full lectures on the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. You can find those at learnstrong.net, but we'll at least summarize very quickly. All right, let's go to work. After the fall of Troy, this is huge. After the fall of Troy, the gods are really upset. Even the gods who are in favor of the Greeks are upset. Why? Because all of the terrible things that were done, finally after 10 years of frustration, when those guys finally get inside the city, they're taking young infants, throwing them into the air and catching them on the ends of spears, that kind of thing. They're showing, like we said, Priam is killed in front of the altar. Cassandra is at the altar and begs for her life, and they take her. It is all of this that will make the gods really upset. Athena will come to Poseidon and say, you need to make sure these Greeks have a bitter homecoming. So for your notes, this is the first thing we want to say. All of the stories of the Greek heroes coming home, the ones who survived, they all have really tough trips to get home. None more tough than Odysseus. 10 years he's at the walls of Troy, right? 10 more years he is wandering, trying to get home. So much so that the very word Odyssey, journey, will be built from the name of Odysseus. Right? That means 20 years Odysseus has been gone, as we said before. Now, the story of the Odyssey, and I said this in earlier lectures when I was actually lecturing the Odyssey, is a fascinating text, epic poem, because it is going to move from location to location. In the Iliad, we don't have this game. By and large, we just simply have a very linear kind of storytelling. But in the Odyssey, we have different kinds of geographic locations, and then there's things happening. And you're kind of expected to be able to kind of hold all this in your mind. Let's play the game now quickly. First of all, we are on Ithaca. It's been a long time, 20 years. It's been a long time. Penelope has been told, dude, your husband, your man, he's dead. You need to remarry so we can have a king on Ithaca. She tries any number of ways to keep these bad guy suitors from marrying her, one of them marrying her. They're all living in her house. They all say, we're not going to move out of your house until you decide which one of us is going to, you're going to marry. She does a really interesting thing where she says, you know what, I got to weave this shroud for my husband's dad, and until that happens, I can't marry anybody. She weaves by day, and at night she comes in and she takes the thread out of the weaving, right? But she's caught, and so ultimately she's going to have to make a decision, right, about who it is she's going to marry. Telemachus, Odysseus' young boy, when he left 20 years ago, he was a young child. Telemachus is now grown up. And in fact, Odysseus had said before he left to Penelope, his wife, if the beard on our boy grows in full, it will be time for you to take another husband. And the beard on Telemachus is starting to come in. So on Ithaca, we have both Penelope and Telemachus in a bit of emotional turmoil. Is Odysseus dead or is he not dead? Will he come home? Will he not come home? Where is Odysseus? Well, we don't know yet. What we do know is that on Mount Olympus, Athena, this is important, Athena has decided it's time for Odysseus to go home. Poseidon is not on Mount Olympus at the time, and so Athena decides, let's have a vote among the gods to bring Odysseus home. Why does she not want Poseidon there? Because Poseidon has decided he definitely wants to see Odysseus dead. Why? We don't know yet. We will find out later in our story. Okay? So they decide, let's help Odysseus. 3 things happen. 1, Athena will go to Telemachus, disguised, and say,